He told her he was stuck in a deposition. He said it in the calm, unhurried voice she had trusted for 11 years. The voice that closed deals and reassured clients and made his wife believe, each time, that she was the only person in the world he would never lie to. He said it while standing 40 feet below her on the main floor of the Rideau Centre, his hand resting on the small of another woman's back, steering her toward the Nordstrom entrance with the easy confidence of a man who had never once imagined being seen. Eloise Chamberlain was watching from the second-floor railing. She had stopped to check her phone for a parking reminder and looked down out of habit, the way you look at a crowd without expecting to find anything. And there he was, Kevin, in the dark wool coat she had taken to the dry cleaner in October, his hair freshly cut, no briefcase, no laptop bag, nothing that said late afternoon deposition, just a tall woman in a camel blazer laughing at something he had whispered, and Kevin's hand moving in a small, proprietary circle at the base of her spine. Eloise did not move. She stood at the railing for 4 minutes and watched the two of them browse a display of scarves near the cosmetics counter, and she cataloged every detail with the precision of someone who had spent 20 years in contract law and knew that what you observed in the first moments was always the truest evidence you would ever have. Then she walked to her car, sat in the parking garage for 11 minutes, and called her sister. She did not cry. That surprised her even then. Eloise Chamberlain was not who Kevin thought she was. He knew she was a lawyer. He knew she was good. What he did not know, because she had never told him, and because he had never asked in the particular way that would have told her he genuinely wanted to understand, was the scale of what she had built. Her mother's family were the Beauchamps of Quebec City. Old money, quiet money, the kind that did not display itself because it did not need to. Her grandmother had founded a textile company in 1961 and sold it in 1987 for more than anyone in the family ever discussed at dinner. The proceeds went into a trust that had been compounding quietly for 37 years. Eloise's branch of the family held a portion of that trust, managed by a financial team she had worked with since articling, and her personal share generated enough annual income that her salary, which was itself considerable, was largely irrelevant. She had never told Kevin because she had watched what money did to the people around her mother. The renovations that appeared after her cousins married. The suddenly very interested in-laws. The shift in the texture of every conversation the moment someone learned the last name and made the connection. Her older sister, Claudette, had married a man who spent 3 years being charming before revealing himself to be a meticulous spender of other people's futures. The divorce had cost Claudette 4 years, and a significant sum. Eloise had made a decision at 26 that she would live like what she appeared to be, a hard-working lawyer with a good salary and careful habits. She drove a practical car. She rented before they bought the house together. She brought her lunch to work 3 days a week. The discipline was genuine. The disguise was deliberate. The test was ongoing. She met Kevin Whitmore at a firm retreat in Muskoka when she was 29. He was a commercial architect with strong opinions about sightlines and a good laugh, and he had spent most of the Saturday evening talking to the oldest partner's wife about her garden with what appeared to be genuine interest. That was what got Eloise, not the laugh. Not the Muskoka weekend charm that most men in that room were performing. The fact that he had chosen, without apparent calculation, to spend 40 minutes talking to an 81-year-old woman about her dahlias. She watched him all weekend. She was an observer by training and by nature, and Kevin passed most of what she noted. He was patient with the waitstaff at dinner. He did not interrupt. When a junior associate made an embarrassing mistake on a client presentation, Kevin was the one who smoothly redirected the conversation without calling attention to the error. They dated for 1.5 years. She paid attention the entire time. They married when she was 32. She organized everything. Kevin designed a beautiful card and wrote a moving speech and charmed every single person in the room, including her grandmother, which was no small thing. She filed that observation too, but differently. She told herself it was a strength. She was almost right. The first 5 years were good in the way early marriages are good, when both people are still performing their best versions of themselves and have not yet revealed the full architecture of their flaws. Kevin was warm and funny and occasionally brilliant. He was also, she came to understand, a man who thrived when the environment around him was managed well and fell apart with remarkable speed when it wasn't. He forgot things, not maliciously. He forgot dentist appointments, mortgage renewal dates, the name of the plumber they had used twice, the login for the property insurance portal. He forgot to call his mother back which meant Eloise called his mother back. He forgot their daughter Simone's school council meeting, which meant Eloise went alone and represented both of them, and answered questions about their household income with a composure that should have been his to provide. She managed it all: the house in Westboro, the rental property in the glebe that had been hers before they married, the quarterly check-ins with the trust advisor she scheduled around Kevin's project deadlines, the daycare, and then the school, and then the after-school program for Simone and their son Theo, born 3 years after. She tracked Kevin's professional liability insurance renewals. She filed their taxes. She kept a shared calendar that only one of them regularly updated. Kevin called her organized. His mother Paulette called her efficient, and did not mean it as a compliment. His younger brother Shane said she ran a tight ship with an expression that suggested this was slightly frightening. The family of a man who needed to be organized had mistaken the person doing the organizing for the problem. Paulette Whitmore was skilled in the art of being kind in ways that left marks. She arrived at their home with flowers and stayed for a week, and managed, during that week, to rearrange the kitchen into a configuration that did not suit the way Eloise cooked. Ask Kevin in front of Eloise whether he was eating enough, and refer to Eloise's work schedule as ambitious in the tone people use for choices they find mildly irresponsible. Every visit had a version of this: the praise that wasn't quite praise, the concern that wasn't quite concern. She was not added to the Whitmore family group chat until she asked. When she asked, Kevin said it was just a thing they forgot, and she believed him because she needed to, not because the evidence supported it. Shane's wife Donna had been in the group chat since they started dating. Eloise brought it up once. She chose her moment carefully, on a Sunday evening when the children were in bed and Kevin was relaxed, and there was no pressure from either direction. "I feel like your family doesn't include me," she said. Not in a combative way, in the way of someone presenting a documented observation. "It has been consistent enough that I don't think it's accidental anymore." Kevin set down his coffee. He had the expression she had learned to recognize, the expression of a man who has decided that the most efficient resolution to a problem is to reclassify it as not a problem. "My mom loves you," he said. "Shane thinks you're great. You're too hard on them, Elle. They're just like that with everyone." She did not raise it again. She recorded it differently, the way her family had always recorded things, not in files exactly, but in the careful, continuous ledger of a woman who had grown up understanding that documentation was not paranoia. It was preparation. The trust continued to grow. The advisor sent quarterly reports that Eloise read on her tablet at the kitchen table. After Kevin had gone to bed, the house quiet around her, the numbers moving in directions that had nothing to do with anyone's opinion of her efficiency. She paid for Simone and Theo's registered education savings from her salary. The trust remained untouched, patient, accumulating. Kevin believed his wife earned well for a lawyer, but watched her budget carefully because she was, as he told people, very practical. He believed the rental property in the glebe was a lucky find she had gotten into before prices went unreasonable, which was almost true, if you did not ask who had provided the down payment or where that capital had originated. Kevin had never asked. She had been in Halifax for a week, a file that had escalated into something requiring her physical presence at a maritime arbitration, long days in a borrowed boardroom, evenings alone in a hotel near the harbor with takeout and briefs. She had called Kevin every evening. He answered most nights. He sounded normal. He mentioned that Simone had a cold and that Theo had gotten a star on his reading chart. He said his mother had come to help with the kids while Eloise was away, which Eloise noted but did not comment on. On the last morning, she texted him her return flight. WestJet from Halifax at 1. Should be home by 4:30. His reply came 40 minutes later. "Great. Kids will be happy. Drive safe." She had meant to take a cab from the airport and let herself back in quietly, maybe start dinner. What happened instead was that her flight landed early, and her checked bag came out first, and she was in the Uber before she had fully processed that she was actually in Ottawa, actually going home. She texted Kevin from the bridge. "Almost home." No reply. She let herself in through the side door. The house was not empty the way a house is empty when the children are at school and both parents are at work. It was quiet in the particular way that tells you someone is trying to keep it quiet. She stood in the mudroom and listened. She heard the low murmur of voices from upstairs. 2 voices, one of them Kevin's, one of them a register she did not recognize. She set her bag down. She walked to the kitchen and stood for a moment looking at the counter, which had the specific disorder of Kevin's cooking. The kind that had always driven her quietly insane. The open olive oil, and the abandoned cutting board, and the dish towel crumpled near the sink. She stood there and did not move, and the arithmetic ran itself without her permission. All the small things she had stored, and not examined, clicking into sequence the way evidence does. When the last piece finds its place, she heard the stairs. Kevin appeared in the kitchen doorway in a gray Henley she had bought him last Christmas. Behind him, partially visible and then visible, a woman she had never seen. Shorter than Eloise. Dark hair. Wearing one of the hotel robes from the spa weekend. Eloise had been given as a gift by a client, and brought home still in its packaging. For a full 3 seconds no one spoke. Then Kevin said her name, Eloise, and the way he said it told her everything she had ever needed to know about the texture of his deceptions. It was not horrified. It was not broken. It was the voice of a man running calculations. The same voice he used when a project came in over budget, and he needed to pivot without letting the client see it. The woman, for her part, took 2 steps backward and disappeared toward the stairs. Kevin started to speak. Eloise held up her hand. She walked to the kitchen table and sat down. She placed her hands flat on the surface, she said. "Sit down, Kevin, please." He sat. She had, in the 4 hours since landing, done a number of things that Kevin did not know about, and would not have expected, because Kevin had never genuinely understood what kind of a mind he was married to. She had called her sister from the cab. She had sent 3 texts, one to her trust advisor, one to the family solicitor, who had handled Beauchamp matters for longer than Eloise had been alive, and one to a colleague who specialized in family law and owed her a professional favor. She opened her phone and placed it on the table between them. She had pulled their joint credit card statements before boarding, scrolling through the last 14 months, with the efficient eye of someone who spent her professional life reading financial records. There were restaurant charges on nights. Kevin had said he was working late, an Airbnb booking on a Thursday in March, when he had been at what he described as a planning charrette in Gatineau, a jewelry purchase from a boutique on Elgin Street, for $430 on her birthday, the birthday on which she had received a card and a dinner she organized herself. She walked him through each item. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She spoke in the measured register she used with opposing counsel when she had the stronger file and knew it. "This has been going on for at least 14 months, she said, possibly longer. "The financial record is clear, and I say this not to hurt you, but because you should understand what I have and what I will use if this becomes adversarial. You have never been careful, Kevin. You have been married to a careful person, which is not the same thing, and you have confused the two for 11 years. Kevin's hands were on the table. They were not steady. He said the things men in that chair tend to say. That it was a mistake. That he had not meant for it to go this far. That he loved her. That they had children. That they could work through it. She listened to each one. She had heard versions of them across tables in her professional life, and knew exactly how much they weighed. She let him finish. Then she said, "I want a separation. The papers will be drawn up this week. You can stay in the guest room until we have a plan. After that, you will need to arrange alternative housing. I would prefer we do this in a way that protects Simone and Theo as much as possible. That is the only thing I am not willing to negotiate." She stood. She picked up her phone. She walked upstairs. The woman in the hotel robe had gone. Eloise did not check what she had taken. The weeks that followed had a particular shape that Eloise recognized from files she had worked on over the years. The shape of a life that had been functioning because one person had been performing the structural work invisibly. And what happened when that person stopped? Kevin could not find the property insurance policy. He did not know the name of Theo's pediatrician. He had no record of the school's emergency contact protocols. He did not know that the furnace filter needed changing every 3 months, or that the rental property in the glebe had a management company, or what the management company was called. He did not know the login for the joint investment account, which Eloise had painstakingly set up when Theo was born, and which Kevin had signed the forms for without reading them. He called her 6 times in the first 2 weeks with questions about passwords and account numbers and scheduling. She answered each one once, clearly, without commentary. The 7th time she did not answer and sent the information by email, which was recorded, which was deliberate. Paulette arrived to help. She stayed for 10 days. Eloise knew this because Simone mentioned it, not because Kevin told her. In those 10 days, Paulette discovered what she had apparently never thought to ask about in 11 years. What it actually took to keep the household running. She called Shane one evening, and Shane's wife Donna told Claudette, who told Eloise. She didn't do anything, Paulette had apparently said, meaning it kindly. She did everything. It was the most accurate thing Paulette Whitmore had ever said about her, and it arrived too late, filtered through 3 people, spoken in a kitchen that was no longer Eloise's to stand in. The woman, whose name Eloise had learned by then was Justine, lasted about as long as these things tend to last once the architecture is revealed. Kevin without the organized household and the managed calendar, and the social machinery, was a different proposition than Kevin with all of it. By February, he was sending emails that were shorter and more formal, and by March the emails had stopped entirely. Eloise did not feel satisfied by this. She was surprised to find she felt very little about it at all. She had moved into a townhouse in Hintonburg in January. She bought it directly, no mortgage, through a subsidiary account she had maintained separately throughout the marriage, one of several quietly held instruments that had been structured this way since before she had met Kevin, since before she had understood exactly what she was preparing for. She had not known, at 26, that she was preparing for this. She had simply known that a woman who could be financially legible to everyone in her life was a woman whose choices would always be filtered through other people's calculations. The townhouse had a small garden. Theo claimed the back corner for a project involving a large quantity of mud and some ambitious engineering. Simone chose the bedroom with the built-in shelves and immediately filled them with the chapter books she had been accumulating since grade 1. Eloise planted rosemary along the front step because she had always liked the smell of it when she came home. She returned to practicing law, but not only practicing. She had, in the months following the separation, been approached by the board of a women's legal aid organization she had been funding quietly for 4 years through a donor-advised fund Kevin had not known about. They asked her to take a more formal role. She said yes. The work suited her in ways she had not expected. She brought to it the same skills she had spent a decade deploying in service of other people's lives: the operational precision, the eye for detail, the capacity to hold multiple complex systems in her head simultaneously and know at any moment which one required attention. She had been running a household, a marriage, a career, and a quietly accumulating financial life all at once for 11 years. Running an organization turned out to require exactly the same things, applied in daylight, under her own name. Her name. There was a moment in late spring when she was walking through the lobby of a downtown building for a meeting with a real estate developer who was considering a significant donation to the organization. The building had been acquired the previous year by a holding company. The holding company was one of the Beauchamp Trust's investment arms. She had known this because her advisor had mentioned it in a quarterly call, and she had noted it the way she noted most things, without comment. The developer greeted her in the lobby and said, as developers always do when they want to establish a sense of having done their research, "I understand you're connected to the Beauchamp family. I didn't realize the foundation had Beauchamp backing," she said. "I am the Beauchamp backing." The developer blinked. She shook his hand and walked to the boardroom and conducted the meeting with the same composure she brought to everything, and only later in her car allowed herself to feel the particular sensation of a woman who has been a footnote in her own story for a long time and has recently become the subject. Kevin found out about the trust, the way men in his position tend to find out, through someone else, too late. A mutual acquaintance mentioned the Beauchamp name in connection with the legal aid organization. Kevin searched it and found a profile in a national magazine, a recent one, describing Eloise as a philanthropic figure in the legal access space with deep family connections to Quebec's Beauchamp Group. There was a photograph of her at the townhouse, taken from the front step, the rosemary just visible at the edge of the frame. He called on a Sunday evening in October. She let it ring 3 times before answering. His voice had changed in the months since she had last heard it at length. The pitch had shifted in the way of someone who has stopped performing and is speaking from wherever the performance used to hide the real thing. He sounded quieter, smaller. "Eloise," he said. "I've been reading about the foundation. I didn't know. About your family. I didn't know any of it." She looked out her kitchen window at the garden, where Theo had abandoned his engineering project for the winter, the stakes still in the ground. "You didn't know," she said, "because you didn't ask. You didn't ask about my family. You didn't ask where the Glebe property came from. You didn't ask why a lawyer who made good money never once seemed anxious about it. You never asked what was in my name, Kevin, because you were not curious about me. You were comfortable with me. Those are different things. The silence on the line had the quality of something finally landing. I should have asked, he said. Yes, is there anything I can do? She looked at the rosemary. She thought about the hotel robe. She thought about the 14 months of credit card receipts laid out on the kitchen table, and the evening she had spent constructing that sequence with the same care she brought to building a legal argument, and how she had felt doing it, not vindicated exactly, more like clear, like the particular clarity that comes when you stop explaining and start simply observing what is. You can be honest with Simone and Theo, she said. That is what you can do. They deserve a father who tells them the truth about the things they are old enough to understand. That matters more than anything you could do for me. She ended the call. She made herself a cup of tea and took it to the garden. It was October in Ottawa, and the air had the particular smell of that season. Wood smoke and cold soil and the last of the leaves, and she stood in it for a long time. She thought about the Rideau Centre, the second-floor railing, the 4 minutes she had stood there watching, not yet shaking, not yet anything, except observing, the way she had always observed, the way she had been observing, since she was young enough to understand that information collected calmly was more useful than information collected through tears. She had not broken against that railing. She had simply updated her assessment. The assessment had taken 11 months to fully action. In that time, she had restructured one element of the trust, purchased the townhouse, joined a board, given a magazine interview, and planted rosemary. She had also, with a care she had not expected to need, explained to 2 children who were small and confused, and had done nothing wrong that sometimes grown-ups could not stay married, and that this had nothing to do with them, and everything to do with choices that adults make and must live with. That part had been the hardest. Not the paperwork, not the kitchen table conversation, not Kevin's voice in October. Simone sitting across from her at the small table by the window, asking if Dad would still be at Christmas, and Theo, who was younger and more literal, asking if Rosemary, the cat they had gotten 2 years before, would still live at the house. Yes to both, she had said. Yes and yes. Some things stay. In November, she deleted the folders she had kept on her phone since the afternoon in the Rideau Centre. The credit card statements, the Airbnb record, the jewelry receipt, the photograph she had taken of the 2 of them from the railing, before she had fully understood she was taking it. She held the phone for a moment before confirming. Then she confirmed, and the folder disappeared, and the screen returned to a photograph of Simone and Theo on the Gatineau Hills Trail from the August-long weekend, both of them sweaty and pleased with themselves, Theo holding a walking stick he had found and immediately committed to as essential equipment. She set the phone face down on the table. She looked at the kitchen she had chosen for herself, the one with the high windows and the narrow shelf where she kept the cookbooks she actually used. The rosemary was dried now, hanging from a hook by the window, cut from the garden before the frost. She thought about what she had wanted at 29 when she had stood at a dinner party, watching a man talk to an old woman about dahlias. She had wanted to know if genuine attention was possible, if someone could see her, all of her, without it changing the way they stood in relation to her. She had run the test for 11 years. The test had its answer. The answer was not what she had hoped, but the knowing she had come to understand was its own kind of wealth. She had built her life with precision, even the parts that had needed to be dismantled. She knew how to build. She had always known how to build. The rosemary smelled like itself in the warm air of the kitchen. Outside the window, the city moved through its November dark. Somewhere on the other side of town, in a house that had been hers, and then had not been, Kevin was living in the spaces between the systems she had built, learning slowly what those systems had been worth. She was not there to watch. She did not need to be. She knew the answer to that one already, too. Some structures are only visible from the outside, after they are gone, by the people who never thought to ask who built them. Eloise Chamberlain had always known exactly what she had built. She had simply for a long time allowed someone else to live in it without asking. She did not make that offer to anyone again.